You're listening to the Game of Inches podcast, powered by Mayflower Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Jacob Smith and Andrew McGinnis.
Welcome in, guys. This is the Game of Inches podcast. We try and talk every single sport here on the podcast. And today, well, I'm always excited for the podcast, but especially today as a Montreal Canadiens fan, we have Marco D'Amico from MontrealHockeyNow.com, beat reporter, writer, everything you name it to do with the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, I'm Andrew. I have Jacob Smith with me, my co-host, and I'm super happy to have you here, Marco. We appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to breaking down all kinds of things Habs, including the addition of Haligonian Justin Barron. But I just want to ask first and foremost how you got started in the writing industry and reporting with sports, and of course with Montreal Hockey Now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, geez, how much time you got? So I guess, once I finished university, I was kind of looking for an angle for writing. I didn't go to the traditional route, which is usually like you go into journalism, you intern, you do what you got to do. No, I was the idiot that decided to get a degree in history, master's degree in history with an angle on sports and marketing. Nothing to do with writing. But, I kind of developed this feel after doing my thesis that I could do a lot of writing. And obviously growing up, spending my March breaks and my summers in Halifax, I really got into junior hockey. And so, the Canadians at that time were off and on, their rebuild was starting. And I was like, okay, well, here we are, all these picks, all these young players. And here I am knowing a lot of the industry in terms of, junior hockey, amateur hockey development. Maybe I could write about that. And I started a blog called Scrimmage and Stats that I ran basically up until February. And so I would just do, draft coverage, draft rankings, et cetera, and kind of just built up, my persona on Twitter from there. And then I would say recently, I'd been on the radio. I do TSN 690 on a weekly basis in Montreal. And then also on the French side, there's 91.9 Sports, where I got my first start. So, my name had been thrown out there. And then I was approached by Montreal Hockey Now, Jimmy specifically, and Dan, had been given my name amongst others that could potentially fill that slot of beat writer, because they were looking to get established in the Montreal market. And, we sat down, we spoke about it. They basically gave me the ins and outs of what they'd expect. And I mean, how do you turn it down? How do you turn down the opportunity to sit in that press gallery that you used to look up to as a kid and say, damn, I want to be there one day. And I could tell you the day that game one, it was Montreal-Toronto, February 21st. Montreal bumped Toronto, but it wasn't even the game. It was just being in the rafters and seeing the players my father and grandfather watched, that helped them fall in love with the team that eventually led to me following that team. It was surreal.
Awesome. You were talking to us a little bit off air about Halifax, and you just mentioned there that you used to spend your summers and sometimes some March breaks here. What made you fall in love with the city? Obviously, people don't really know where Halifax is sometimes. Even people in Canada, they're like, oh, that's kind of like East Coast, right? But it's a beautiful place once you get here. There's lots to fall in love with. What kind of drew you to Halifax?
I feel like you just recited one of the lines from Classified's Maritime song. I'm not even going to lie.
That's awesome.
So
that's amazing.
Right off the bat. No, I mean, guys, I first of all, the first time I went to Halifax, I noticed something really weird. It's the only exit 0 on the entire Trans-Canadian Highway. So that immediately caught my mind. And then, growing up in Montreal, everything's in one place. Downtown, like it's large, but everything is very much, and then obviously you have your different regions. Halifax was set up in such a different way for me that, whenever I would go there, it was almost like an escape from it was a little mini vacation. And every time I would discover a little bit more of the town, and, basically, in Italy, where I'm from, we're right off the coast. And so being on the coast is just something I enjoy. There's something about seawater and the smell of a harbor that really got me going. And, the first time I went down to the harbor in Halifax, I was sold. I wanted to be there every summer, every Saturday night. The moment I was able to earn any kind of money, I would go down there, watch the buskers play, jump and run up the wave because that's what everybody else did. And then go get myself a little ice cream down the boardwalk. So the city was great. And then obviously, I think back then it was called the Metro Center. Could I be wrong? Yeah, obviously, there you go. So,
and we still call it that too.
Yeah, I know that's what everybody calls it, but I think it's like the Scotia Bank.
Scotia Bank Center.
There you go. So, and one day I was walking by and they were giving away free tickets to a Mooseheads game, and I jumped at the opportunity. I was like, well, my dad likes to watch the Canadians, so maybe I could get into hockey and start watching this. This was before I really got into hockey at the age of like 8, 9. And, the atmosphere was different. You have like cowbells going off in the background. You just, all these young kids get to obviously, because the tickets are either free or very cheap. So it's a very young crowd, a lot of families there. I really kind of fell in love with that concept. And it's just, for me, ultimately the combination of just like a rabid sports town that didn't have a professional team, but had a team, it really kind of spoke to me in terms of like how niche Halifax was. And then obviously I've been noticing over the last couple of years that it's going through an industrial boom, and there's basically all kinds of new buildings in downtown Halifax.
Big time.
I think we need to take another tour down Citadel Hill and take a look at the view towards the harbor, because that was the joke back then. Is like, oh no, they can't see the harbor anymore. There's too many buildings in the way. Well, there's even more now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's if writing doesn't ever work out for you, man, I'm telling you, a travel agent might be the next best job for you. I mean, you're selling me on my own city. You're making me feel prideful from where I'm from. So gotta love that. And if you're ever in town, you better email me or message me on Twitter, and we'll
oh my God, if I'm ever in town, I think you'll find me on Argyle Street somewhere.
I love it. He knows the streets.
We'll see you. We'll definitely see you. And especially in the summer, it's such a great place, and there's so many patios everywhere. And there's probably been some new patios since you've last been here, Marco. So you definitely have to come around. But the main reason I wanted to have you on, of course, I could talk Canadians for probably 24 hours straight, diehard fan, and I can't wait to go to Montreal this month. But I want to talk about Justin Barron. Of course, both Barron brothers in the NHL right now. Barron's, grew up in Halifax. Everybody knows them. Justin Barron was the captain of the Halifax Mooseheads. What a dream for someone like him. You grow up in a town, you watch the Mooseheads, like you said, no professional sports team growing up, and not only to get drafted in the QMJHL, but to play and be the captain of the Halifax Mooseheads, a huge accomplishment, a great leader in the community, and now, of course, playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Although I did hear he was a Maple Leafs fan, but I'm happy to have him on the Montreal Canadiens now. But, of course, Arturi Lehkonen was a player I really liked, Marco. He was a great two-way player, but I think it's the way that Montreal was able to move him and what they got in return from Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche, who's actually Jake's team. I don't think we could turn it down. I think it's a win-win for both teams. And I just wanted to read off here. Obviously, several seasons with the Halifax Mooseheads, of course. In that last season, 33 games played, 31 points. I mean, obviously a great player, great two-way defenseman, but also somebody that can be reliable on the back end too. And of course, he scores his first goal just a couple days ago, and it was a pretty one. It wasn't just a regular goal; it was a very nice goal as well. So, what can you tell us about kind of that? The addition that Justin Barron really brings to this team, and also a young player as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's unique in his skill set and what Montreal has as a prospect pool. You look at Alexander Romanov, you look at Caden Gooley, Jaden Struble, Jordan Harris. They all have something a little bit to their advantage, but I feel like Justin Barron has that lateral mobility that is just so rare to find. Players that can walk that line the way they do is just so. It's like a quarterback that can rush. Like, it's so rare. It's becoming obviously more and more popular, but a rushing quarterback, especially a good one, is like so new age that when you see it, it just takes your takes your breath away. Same concept, I feel like, with a player like that. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be a star player, like a top pair guy, although development is development and anything is possible. But he very much projects as a steady top 4, right shooting, smooth skating defenseman. I mean, they don't grow on trees. Teams pay. I remember Seth Jones. Remember that trade? Like, look at what teams pay for right shot defensemen. So to be able to get one in a trade for what is basically a 2-year rental for Colorado, because I don't think they'll be able to afford Artturi Lehkonen's salary demands when the time comes. I don't think they're going to have to deal with Halifax's own Nathan McKinnon or Cole Harbor. Sorry, I know there's a distinction. But they're gonna have to pony up, right? So I'm not sure that they'll be able to retain someone like Lehkonen. So to me, and Ken Hughes was pretty straightforward about this. He was going to keep Artturi Lehkonen until Joe Sakic called and said Barron in a second. And if he would have said no to that, I would have probably been really mad, because that is an incredible haul. And I would like to thank the Tampa Bay Lightning for enabling something like this by paying what they paid for Brandon Hagel, because I don't think that the arms race begins for that type of player without Brandon Hagel setting the market price for what is non-rental top middle 6 tweener players that you can put throughout your lineup. And I think, we saw Hagel, we saw Järnkrok, and then you can basically assume that Lehkonen was in between the two, but closer to Hagel, and that's exactly what happened. When it comes to Barron as a player, I think the thing that impressed me the most in his draft year, despite having to come back from blood clots, which is insane, he just didn't miss a beat. The mobility was there. He had dropped a lot of weight because of what he was going through, but it didn't inhibit him from being effective. He was an intelligent player, and I think that's what's key. He uses his stick right. The gap control is done well. My only critique I've ever had of his game is it's almost like a dodgeball reference. He's got to get mean. That comes with maturity. I spoke to his coach in Colorado for the Eagles, Greg Cronin, and that interview, he told me straight up, if he can get that intensity up to his game when he reaches that level of maturity and he realizes that's what it's going to take, and he has to a degree already, but if he can take it up a level, he'll be a very dangerous player.
You talked a lot about the prospects there. What do you think is going to be the distinguishing factor between him and someone like a Caden Poole or Romanov or Harris? Like you said, I personally think he's probably maybe the best skater out of the bunch. He's somebody that really moves well, like you said. But what are just some of the things that you think he'll be able to bring to the Canadians this season and going forward that might be different?
I think he has a better shot than all of them. I think that's the key. He's got better shooting mechanics. And that'd be a wrist shot, a one-timer. When he's in the offensive zone, he's a shoot-first defenseman. You were talking about last game when he got his first goal. He led the Canadians in shots. He had 5 shots. The closest after that was like Cole Caulfield with 3. So whenever you see a defenseman start getting pucks to the net like that on such a consistent basis, because when you see it kind of growing over game, that goes to show you that he's going to be a play driver offensively, because even if those shots don't go in, they're heavy shots. They create rebounds, and they did create rebounds in those games, and it caused all kinds of mayhem for Anton Forsberg and the Ottawa Senators. And then you look at the way that he's able to walk that line. That is a rare skill. A lot of people in their lateral movements, sometimes get caught up in their feet. Sometimes will try and hesitate because of the coverage. I feel like Barron has a lot of confidence in that ability, and that's what allowed him to create separation on his first goal, because he was really able to pull the puck with him all the way down and then take the shot, which is rare. Usually they'll try to reposition themselves to then take the shot. You lose that split second, and the checker will get you to try and deflect the puck either outside or to the corner. And that's how he was able to score it, which caught Anton Forsberg off guard. That specific sequence is exactly why I think he's a unique prospect for Montreal, because Caden Gooley is going to be the more fast-paced, rush defensive type of big D-man. Jordan Harris is more the smooth skating, quick on the edges, puck retrieval, and breakout kind of defenseman. And Alexander Romanov is just a wrecking ball. Let's call it what it is. So I think that they all kind of bring something that's a little different, despite also being good in other areas. But Barron's strength is going to allow him to play in all situations: power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5.
And you got to just love the story for him, like you mentioned. And just, of course, getting to the Canadians, that first goal wasn't your typical first NHL goal. You love to see them come like that. Either way, you'll always remember your first goal, but scoring a goal like that's super impressive. And I really want to elaborate just on what you were talking about with reaching out to the coaching staff of the Colorado Eagles and just kind of ask you what Martin St. Louis and Richardson and so many of the coaching staff might have said to you or to the media in general about him. And just kind of like the biggest thing, people, they always say, be yourself. We brought you for a reason. You mentioned 5 shots. I mean, obviously he's going to be himself, but what is said to make players feel so comfortable to want to just do that? Because like you mentioned, it did seem like he was very comfortable out there shooting the puck 5 times. It's a lot.
Martin St. Louis, my friends.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, I could just imagine as the players. I sat in the room my second game in the press conference room, and when he came in, the aura around him, it's like he's got this force field of respect that pulls you in. And he sounds like a college professor out there, the way he talks about the game, the way he explains the game, the patience he has for both the players and reporters to thoroughly explain his thought process. He's methodical. He's not yelling at anybody. It's very new school in the way that he goes about it. You could tell he was teaching kids how to play hockey in the minor leagues, because that's exactly how he talks to people about the game. He really breaks it down. And I think the way they brought on Barron was smart. A, on the road. B, if he made a mistake, they put him right back out there. And then if the game went to overtime, you know what? Screw it, kid. Go. And they put him out first presence. Boom. Right out. And then again. And then again. And it was, I think, 3 or 4 times in overtime in his first game. That's how you build confidence. And that's how you do that. Even if Barron goes to Laval in the next 2 or 3 weeks and joins them for their playoff run, which is likely because they sent him down when they acquired him to make him eligible for the AHL playoffs. Even if he goes down, the amount of confidence that he's gained in playing with the Canadians in this kind of a situation is invaluable. And in the past, you would see it with other players where the weight of playing for the Canadians in a situation like this was actually something that hurt their development. We think of Ryan Poehling, for example, who scored the hat trick against the Leafs and then came the next year and, well, things weren't as good as they were. By creating significant developmental confidence, you're able to then go back and work on things in a more positive aspect than seeing it as a punishment. And I think that's the switch that we've seen from a developmental standpoint. And that's just not Barron, that's Caulfield, that's Suzuki, that's Romanov, and you're going to see it with Jordan Harris. But St. Louis knows Jordan Harris a little well, so his son plays on Jordan's team, or Jordan's old team in Northeastern, so they've known each other for a little bit.
You obviously have been mentioning a lot about the prospects. I just kind of want to know, what's the feeling like in the city? Obviously, it feels like the bubble was forever ago. The Stanley Cup run obviously was magical for the Montreal Canadiens fans and even Canadians alike. Like, I'm not a huge Canadiens guy, but, I was rooting for them. It would be nice to see a Canadian team win. But has there been a real buy-in to the process with acquiring prospects like Justin Barron to understand that the rebuild hopefully is going to lead to another run like that, or even a Stanley Cup?
There's a generational divide, I would say. I feel like the older fans don't have the patience nor the appreciation for roster building in a salary cap era, and would like a team to be competitive quicker than not. Whereas I feel like the grand majority of fans have accepted the reality that in hockey, there is a cyclical, almost junior-like cyclical event. Not necessarily every 4 years like in junior, but if you do things properly, it could take you, 10, 12 years at the top, like, say, for example, Pittsburgh or Washington or Colorado for the next 6 or 7 years more. So I think what they want is a point per game player. I think what the Montreal Canadiens fans want is an offensive superstar that they haven't had since basically the 70s. it is incredible to think that the last 100-point player was playing before I could count. So this is the thing I've said time and time again, and I go back to this every time. The Montreal Canadiens have not drafted a point per game player that has played on their team and achieved that point per game status in 30 years.
Wow.
Well, I want to ask more about Barron, but you got me sidetracked here. What's your take? And I'm not sure if you were even with hockey now. I'm sure you were doing, like you said, a bunch of other things, but Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I have to get it from you. What are your thoughts about that? Because that was, a very weird situation, the way that was handled. He took some shots at the Montreal Canadiens. I love the prospect pool of the Montreal Canadiens. I'm a fan. I might be biased. Of course I am, but I love the prospect pool. But the way that everything was handled with KK, especially the way he played last year in the playoffs, I got to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think drafting is more or less been fine for the Montreal Canadiens. Development has been the issue. And development in the sense that these players are being asked to fill shoes that they're not ready to fill to mask the lack of roster construction or the lack of skill in roster construction from management. And I'll give you examples. The only reason Jesperi Kotkaniemi played in the NHL at the age of 18 was because Marc Bergevin could not find a bona fide number 2 top 6 center. The only reason Victor Mete played at the age of 19 in Montreal is because Marc Bergevin could not find a bona fide top 4 left shot defenseman. So you continue to see these players being put in situations where they're not being given the opportunity to grow at their own pace. They're being thrown to the wolves. And Jesperi Kotkaniemi is no different. And to add insult to injury, the coaching staff was so aloof with him. And then, they were tossing him aside as if to protect him. No, why are you protecting him now?
Right.
You should have been protecting him when he was 18 years old. That's why you send, even if he's, I understand it's a European player. There's an NHL out clause that allowed him to go back to the Finnish Liga if things didn't work out. But his father got fired from that team. He was the coach by November of that year. He could have just gone to Laval. I'm pretty sure he would have rather gone to Laval than go play for the team that just fired his father, right?
Right.
So there could have been patience there. And not everybody is a Nate McKinnon that can come into the league, play on a third line, and kind of work his way up. I don't think he was physically mature enough then. I barely think he's physically mature enough now. That's a huge problem I have with him as a prospect is the physical growth has been significantly lacking. I think that developmental aspect is the issue, because anybody who would see a player like Kotkaniemi would say, hey, this guy's got toothpick for legs, but he's got the torso of a 6'2", 220-pound center. Where's the problem here? Oh, that's right. Lower body strength. You focus on this for the next 2 years and only this. And that didn't happen. So I don't blame the player specifically on his own. I think there's a systemic issue that even, Jeff Molson and Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes have addressed already. But I do bring it back to the player for not, looking at what the problem was and trying to fix it instead of just blaming the Montreal Canadiens for his problems. I feel like, when a situation like that happens, I think there's fault on both parties.
Do you think there's going to be any concern about that with Justin?
No. And the reason for that is because Justin won't be asked to be a savior right off the bat. I think this management team is much smarter, in my opinion, and has been around youth hockey much more. And with no disrespect to Marc Bergevin, it's a reality. Kent Hughes, his job was to develop his clients. Jeff Gorton is a scout by trade. That's how he got into the executive role. And then you throw in Martin St. Louis, who basically has been around youth hockey with his sons and coaching. These are individuals that now understand what the new reality is of these players coming up. And, they're going to probably talk about Jaden Struble in the next couple of days. Kent Hughes was Jaden Struble's family advisor before becoming before becoming GM. And I guarantee you that he's going to suggest to Jaden Struble to go back for his senior year in Northeastern, whereas in the past, Marc Bergevin would have probably tried to sign Jayden Struble right away and throw him into Laval with the rest of the defensive prospects, and they basically a sink or swim situation, not necessarily thinking about the player's long-term growth. That's the shift.
Right.
And so that now we see, like, for example, last game, there were 3 rookies in the lineup. The first time in 6 years that the Canadians have 3 rookies in the lineup on the defensive side at the same time. The difference is 6 years ago, the only reason that happened was because they had 8 injuries on their defensive core. They decided by choice to play 3 rookies this time because the philosophy's changed. They're not looking for saviors. They're not looking to compete right this second. They're looking to bring these guys up that are all around the same age at the same time and elevate them at the same time. That's the difference. That's the key.
There was a story that I really wanted to bring up today, and there's credit that goes to so many people with this. It was written by Bill Spur from saltwire.com. It's about Robin Hunter, who was the athletic therapist, Marco, for the Halifax Mooseheads. And she was the person that actually first discovered the blood clot that Justin Barron had. And it actually wasn't the first time that she was on staff to discover that. It was Samuel Dubé, another player for the Halifax Mooseheads, that she also discovered that with. And I just really, I wanted to give credit to her, to the Moosehead staff, and also Cam Russell, the GM, for giving her the praise that she deserves, because there's a lot of great quotes in the media, in the newspapers, for him showing his appreciation. I think there's so much that goes into a hockey team. And ever since I've tried to, whether it's doing podcasting or meeting different people and trying to, I guess you could say, be in the media, I've definitely learned that sports aren't just the players and the coaches. There's so much that goes into it with the training staff, the writers like yourself. There's so much into it. And I think it really just speaks to how great she was at her job. And then you also look at the Justin Barron side of it, how he handled it, and the respect he had, and he did everything the doctors said. And I think that it definitely slipped his draft stock, obviously, with Team Canada and everything like that. First and foremost, I just wanted to give a shout out to her, Robin Hunter, and the Halifax Mooseheads. But I just, before we wrap things up, wanted to get your thoughts just on the adversity that Justin Barron has faced. And I don't think a lot of people are really aware of that.
No. And I mean, we followed it in his draft year. I think that if he would have been healthy throughout his entire draft year, he probably would have gone basically where Caden Gooley went. He probably would have gone 15, 16, 17 instead of 25. And you have to put yourself in the mindset of an athlete. You're out of it for months. It's a stressful time because you're trying to, you know that you're a highly touted player and you have a lot of expectations. And I'm sure, Cam Russell had expectations for him as well. Like, Halifax was a good team, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, they were going to the Memorial Cup that year. They were hosting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. So, there's a lot to go into that. And so to have that on an 18-year-old's mind at that young an age, and it's blood clots, like, you don't know necessarily if you're going to be coming back at full physical form. It's a process. And so I've always said this: adversity at a young age molds professionals, especially as they're coming in. When you look at when players don't succeed or players struggle the most at the NHL level, it's because they've never faced adversity. And that's why I like Justin Barron, because personally, as a player, you see the maturity on the ice. You see the way he presents himself to the media, unfazed, with 20 cameras and 65 microphones in front of him, and just is able to have that conversation. So again, that is a lived experience that serves him and humbles him. And I feel like that makes for a very calm and balanced approach to growing as a professional, because you're never going to be too high. You're never going to be too low, because you know what it's like to be that low. So you're always going to bring it back to center. And so that ability to deal with that anxiety, that stress, those emotions has already been traveled.
You obviously have spent a lot of time in Halifax, like you said. Can you just talk a little bit about the players coming through from the province, more so in general, to the NHL? I think there's been a huge growth in Nova Scotia hockey. Nova Scotia's always been a hockey community. It's always going to be our number one sport. It's always going to be, kids' dreams here to play in the NHL. But actually seeing people like Nate McKinnon, like you mentioned, Brad Marchand, now kind of the new age people like Justin Barron, What do you make of the prospects coming through from Nova Scotia, the impact that they're actually having in the NHL?
Yeah, well, again, ironic you should mention that. I have an article coming out about Riley Kidney, literally in a few hours, another from Halifax that belongs to the Montreal Canadiens. And more, and I've said that we were joking about it in Montreal. We need more Maritimers on the Montreal Canadiens.
Love it.
And we've seen, Sydney has been really good at promoting players from basically the Halifax area. He actually told Chris Letang straight up that it was a mistake for Colorado to have traded Justin Barron.
That's uncharacteristic too of Sid to say something like that.
It's uncharacteristic for Sid to say that publicly, and he didn't. He told Letang in confidence. Chris maybe shouldn't have said that, but it goes to show you, Sid doesn't necessarily go out of his way to be like, yeah, that was a mistake. But he really believes in Justin Barron, and so do I. And I think that, I've been talking about this for a while now, but like if you look at the evolution of the Q, there's a lot more maritime players. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and even PEI has started producing more and more. Like, geez, Noah Dobson, come on. So I like it because when we thought of the Q in the past, it was mostly Quebec-born players or imports. And now we're seeing that more and more Nova Scotians, more and more Maritimers in general are starting to climb up those draft rankings. If I'm not mistaken, Justin Barron was the second or third player from the Q picked in this draft year, and that's because Alexis Lafrenière went first overall. It's, to me, I think the growth in the game, and I witnessed a little Timbits. I witnessed minor league. I used to go to Dalhousie at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch my stepbrother play hockey. So I know how dedicated the community is, the fans are, the parents, bless their souls, that make it so fun to be in the stands at 6 o'clock in the morning when I would rather be dreaming about what I ate last night. To me, it was a complete culture shock because in Quebec, it's a business. Minor hockey is a business. You're taught to be a pro at the age of 12. And I feel like in Nova Scotia, what's different is you're taught to love the game at 12. And that love, you see it on the ice, the passion. Like Brad Marchand and I don't see eye to eye. Like every time we've met, it hasn't gone well.
Oh, really?
But yeah, every time I had a Habs jersey on and hated Montreal and went out of his way to tell me, and I went out of his way to tell him that, well, we'll see about that. And it all came down to passion. It all came down to the love of the game. And that's what drives them to improve, right? That's what drives them to get better. That's what drives them to come back and promote. And that's the thing that I've loved the most, is that it's cyclical. I feel like a lot of time, in Quebec, a lot of these players will go to their American markets, and then that's kind of it. Unless they win a cup, then they bring it back and they do a parade. I feel like in Nova Scotia, a lot of them come back, and they don't just come back to parade what they've won. They come back to get back to the community. Mm-hmm. They come back to promote more minor hockey play. And it's not a very populous province. Like the island of Montreal has like 3 times the population of Nova Scotia.
Right.
But still able to bring about a concise, organized minor system that is producing more and more hockey players. And that's why I wanted to bring it to Riley Kidney, because I had asked him, I had talked to him about it. And, he's the third in scoring right now in the Q. And, I was just talking to him about, what do you take from your minor hockey days? And he couldn't help but to give the same praise that I just gave, because it's all small town. It's all heart. And at the end of the day, when one succeeds, they all succeed.
You've given us so many great quotes today. Oh, and I can tell you're not just giving them on purpose. You're speaking from the heart and just from what you've learned and what you know. So I, first of all, can't wait to clip that up of what you just said about the Maritimes, because I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you, and all the coaches around here would love to hear that. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just want to ask you, I guess, one more thing. I was impressed, and we knew, Justin Barron, he went to school just down the road from where I grew up, and he obviously was in French immersion, and I know that all the Quebecers loved that. And look, I don't speak French, so I didn't even know if his French was great or not. You can tell me, Marco, but what does that do for him being a Montreal Canadian?
Vaults him pretty much the fan favorite before he touched the ice. Like, how about I put it this way? When Barron scored his first goal, it was probably the loudest pop I've heard since Cole Caulfield scored his second goal of the season, because he hadn't scored in 40 games. He immediately won the hearts of fans, not because he spoke French and therefore you win. It's the fact that he went out of his way to say, listen, I can speak French. I'll answer some of your questions in French. I'm not comfortable in it, but I will try to learn French a little bit more and continue to build on what I've done. And, you know, it's not a prerequisite. You know, I don't want players to think like they need to know it. But if you have it and you're able to communicate, it's a level of respect to a portion of the fan base that isn't privileged enough to be bilingual, that only speaks French, and to have a player whose mother tongue is not French, try at least to give, you know, some form of communication in their language. It goes a long way. It goes so far. And I was talking, you know, because he obviously he went to an immersion program. I was talking to Riley Kidney about this, and, you know, he said to me, he goes, I didn't do French immersion. I wasn't as lucky as Justin or his brother. But I'm taking French right now in university because I want to be able to come in and at least speak to them a little bit in French. And that's I don't know if it speaks to the Acadian influence, obviously, in the area, but there's a respect for the bilinguality of Canada and obviously the market in Montreal that is excessively underappreciated in the Canadian market. And when you have that in front of your face, especially when you got these guys in the queue that have French friends and French players that they've played with and they've practiced, it really takes players and the team and the media off guard. The best thing I could tell you is he won everybody over one shot.
I think definitely people appreciate that too. Obviously, I can't speak French. I took French all the way up until high school and kind of gave up on it. I wasn't very good at it, but I think it's the effort that counts, right? It's the idea that, hey, like, I'm willing to come outside my comfort zone a little bit to try and be able to speak to you a little bit, to be able to give you that regionality that Montreal definitely has with the French-speaking people. But my last question here before we let you go, we really appreciate the time you gave us. Not so much about Justin Barron. It's been coming up in the at least in my news cycle a little bit where I get my news. Carey Price. I know this is probably something that gets asked about a lot lately. What is the deal with him and the Montreal Canadiens? Does it look like he's going to come back next year, or is it going to be one of those things where they try to look to move on from Carey and kind of really go at this rebuild full circle?
I don't know that they're going to go for a full rebuild, but I don't know that that's going to limit them from moving on from Carey Price. I guess the best way I could put it is this way. Carey should probably be playing this week. Not tomorrow, but I wouldn't be surprised if he plays Monday in Montreal versus the Winnipeg Jets. He's close to ready. I mean, we've been watching him at practice. The lateral movements are there. He's traveling with the team. Joel Edmondson did the exact same thing. He traveled with the team for about a week and a half, and then made his debut. I think they're doing the same thing with Carey. Now, look, Elliot Friedman has gone on air and said if Carey Price comes back, there's a very good chance, if he plays games this year, there's a very good chance he gets traded in the offseason. There is one player or one person in the entire world that's going to allow Carey Price to get traded, and that's Carey Price. Because Carey Price holds a full no movement clause. So if he wants to move, he'll sit down with management at the end of the year, and they're going to tell him, listen, we probably won't be competitive for the next year, maybe two. You're getting up there in age. If we can try to retain salary and make a deal work with another team, would you like to go to a contender? And I mean, he deserves a cup. I was heartbroken when King Henrik retired in New York without a cup, because man, he deserved it too. In that final against the King in 2014, he deserved it and never really got to it. So I feel like Carey Price has won everything but that. And, at the end of the day, to see him go would hurt. I mean, I have his signed rookie jersey in my closet that I'm not allowed to take out anymore because I'm apparently an unbiased sports reporter. But to see him go, someone like me, he was my first player that I really followed from the beginning to the end. to see him go would be bittersweet, but understandable given the situation. My take is that both Carey Price and Shea Weber's contract will be moved before the start of next season. My take.
I'm selfishly asking because there's been some reports lately about Darcy Kemper in Colorado maybe not being able to come to an agreement, and I think he would look mighty fine in some maroon and blue.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say no.
I want him to win too, Marco. As a diehard fan, I want him to win too. It's a matter of Carey is.
I want two things. Two things. Go to a contender and let it be in the West.
Yeah.
Because I can't. No fan deserves to feel that pain 4 times a year. No way.
Definitely. I'm hoping to see him at the end of the month. I'll be there to watch the makeup game against the Bruins. And what better a feeling would it be to get to watch Carey play and then hopefully beat the Bruins? Oh, man.
One
time.
Awesome. I mean, I am awaiting his first game in the Bell Center because that's going to be Hallmark card worthy in terms of the ovation he will get. Everything he's gone through, the injuries, the surgery, the obviously seeking the player assistance program, coming back from that. It's been a journey for him, and I think that fans will be able to relate. And I think fans are smart enough to see where things are going and what that could mean for Carey, and they're going to give him the love that he deserves. This is a player, in my opinion. I understand that only players with Stanley Cups have their names in the rafters over there. But if there's one player over the last 25 years that deserves to be up there, I think it's Carey Price.
Unbelievable stuff. It's been a treat to have you. I could talk all day long about all kinds of different players. So much great stuff about Justin Barron, the Canadians in general. Marco D'Amico, Montreal Hockey Now. All the Hockey Nows are great, but Montreal Hockey Now, you are spitting out content like crazy. How many articles you write? I don't know how you find the time. I want to tell you personally, I read them, Marco. They're great. I really enjoy them. And I hope everybody that's listening and watching can definitely check them out as well. So, Marco, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Everybody out there listening, you can find Marco at MontrealHockeyNow.com. Thanks a lot, Marco.
It's a pleasure, man. And by the way, go Avalanche.